Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Welcome to the Shaken Podcast. I'm Steve Sunshine. Your confidence, your mood, your perspective, even your faith may be shaken because of something that's happened in your life. Jesus told us we'd have trouble in this world, so we're shaken but not surprised. He also said, "Take heart, I have overcome the world." In this podcast, you'll hear honest conversations with people who have or are going through life-altering hard times and have found that God was with them in the midst of it all.
We got a small group of guys together, and we went to Europe for 3 weeks. We left my wheelchair at home, and they took turns carrying me that whole time so that we could live life to the fullest without any question of whether something was going to be accessible or not.
Imagine you could take your biggest weakness and turn it into a source of strength for other people. That's what Kevan Chandler did. It's an uplifting story of faith, trust, ingenuity, and friendship. It's the story of how a movement called We Carry Kevan has opened doors to experiences for people all over the world.
I have a disability disease called spinal muscular atrophy. And what that basically means is when my brain sends a message through my spinal cord to tell my muscles what to do, it doesn't really get there properly. And so my muscles grow weaker over time. And so it's a progressive disease, and I have spent my whole life in a wheelchair since I was, I guess, about 4. Until then, people could carry me around. So, but that's when I got a wheelchair.
Yeah. What was that like growing up?
It's all I really knew, and so I didn't think much about it. My sister, who's older than me, also has SMA, is what we call it, and we have an older brother, and our parents are all, we've all kind of fostered this culture of creativity in our home growing up, and so every day was full of what are the possibilities and where the limitations are. How do we get over those or get past those? And some things you just have to say, well, I can't do that, or I can't do that the way you normally would, but, what else can I do, or how else can I do it? And so that was just like a daily experience, and that's what I grew up in. And we also grew up in a very open door home. We had a lot of friends coming and going from our house, and they got to see what our lives looked like, and it kind of became the norm for them of, my sister and I having some extra needs, and we need help with this and that, and it just became very normal for them, and they learned not to leave their shoes or book bags on the floor because they might get run over, stuff like that. But my parents also put forth a lot of effort when we were kids to include us in just the mainstream able-bodied world. We went to church and youth camp and played t-ball and soccer, and went to school and sat in on a normal class, and everything that just regular old kids would do. And it of course took more effort. It took more time and energy from my parents and from us, but they accomplished it. And as a result, my sister and I grew up very acclimated to the world around us, and also understanding how to invite the world around us into our unique situations.
It sounds like that was a very healthy environment, because obviously this is a big challenge, but to grow through it like that, going, this is the way things are. Let's do what we can with what we have.
Yeah. I think it was a really special environment to grow up in. And I think a lot of it came from my parents and their walks with the Lord, and their identity in Jesus, and that really helped to shape how they raised us. And then, of course, when we started our own relationships with the Lord, that continued to inform us and who we were and how we operated.
Was there a moment of conversion for you, or do you feel like you knew Jesus as long as you can remember?
So I grew up in the church. My dad was a deacon, and my mom was involved in Sunday school and VBS and things like that, and just very involved. So we were always there, and I knew the Bible stories and knew who Jesus was. But when I was 6 years old, I was having trouble sleeping because I thought that as a 6-year-old, I should be able to wrap my head around eternity and what that meant. And so my dad, who knows me better than anyone, sat me down and one night, got me out of bed, sat me on his bed, and he knew that rather than explaining eternity to me, what I needed was to be introduced to the person I could spend eternity with. And so that's when he really said, hey, this Jesus that you've heard all about, these stories, he wants a personal relationship with you. And so that's when I really had my conversion, when I asked Jesus into my heart. And so I was 6 years old. I'm 38 now. And so that's, what, math, 32 years of just walking with the Lord.
We were told there'd be no math here. So, you were...
We'll edit that out.
Your story about having those high standards for yourself, like as a 6-year-old, I should be able to understand eternity. That reminds me of our daughter, who I had some very long late night conversations with about things like that. I'm like, whatever, you're 7. What are you asking me this for? But it's funny how some of us are just wired that way.
Yeah. Well, and I realized later on in life, like when I was in high school and college, and kind of at that age where I could, go to concerts or do road trips and without my parents and things. What I realized was going into new places, especially with a wheelchair, was always, for lack of a better term, scary or daunting, because, it's like, well, what if we get to this venue and there's a flight of stairs? Or what if it's too crowded and I can't see? And all these kinds of questions would come up in my mind. But if I was with, one of my best friends, I had a few guys that I traveled with and went to concerts with. And I always thought, well, as long as Danny is with me, or as long as Zach is with me, I'm all right. And places that should have been scary in that sense weren't, because I had this person with me. And I think that's what my dad saw early on, was that he saw that in me and knew, eternity can be a scary thing unless you know Jesus. And you know that he's walking into it with you.
You, in a lot of ways, sound like you could be the poster guy for the importance of friendships. I mean, from a very early age, do you consider yourself someone who's naturally good at making friends? Are you an extrovert?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I think I make friends pretty easily. I have a lot of them, and I like having a lot of them. So,
yeah. And you had really good friends. I mean, the story that I'm assuming your ministry is built on is how, what was it, 8 years ago, I think, you and some friends got together and said, let's take a trip. Now, how did that come about?
Yeah, so after college, I was living with a friend, and we were part of this group of post-college and college-age kids that we're just a bunch of starving musicians, and decided we'd get together once a week for a potluck where if everybody brought a little bit of something, we could, put it all in a stew, or, put it in the oven, and we could all actually have a good homemade meal together and play music and pray and catch up on life. And so we were part of that group, and it was a really wonderful season, a really wonderful group of friends. And every week we were at a different house. And so you can imagine not all of those were accessible. And oftentimes we left my wheelchair in the car, and somebody would just carry me in and sit me on the couch. And so after a couple of years, probably, I guess maybe a year and a half or 2 years of that, the conversation came up of, I do this sometimes without my wheelchair. What if we intentionally did something without my wheelchair? Not as a response to something, but as a dream. And so we decided, a couple of the guys and I decided, well, we grew up on Ninja Turtles and Batman, so let's explore the sewers. And we made a very rudimentary backpack for them to carry me in, and took off one night and went what's called urban spelunking, and explored the sewers in our hometown. And
did you say the sewers?
The sewers, yeah, like the underground.
I'm not. Yeah, this is new to me. The urban spelunking.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's pretty gross, but a lot of fun. And so coming out of that, that was a couple of hours one night on a Friday or Saturday night, and we came out of that and kind of said, well, we survived that. What else can we do? And so about a year later, we came around to this idea of let's go. Well, I guess it was a few months later we came around to the idea. So a year later, we went to Europe, and we made a much better backpack that would last more than a couple hours and was more secure and comfortable for me and for them. And we got a small group of guys together, and we went to Europe for 3 weeks. We left my wheelchair at home, and they took turns carrying me that whole time so that we could live life to the fullest without any question of whether something was going to be accessible or not.
Was there, what was the biggest challenge in doing that?
Well, there were a few. We didn't have any money, so we had to do a crowdfund for that. Okay. So we set up a GoFundMe, and that had some scary moments of going slow, but the Lord provided, and we got some media attention, and our friends also were really generous in being part of that. And but then also our development of the backpack was quite a challenge. We spent probably 3 months before the trip, putting together ideas, taking them out, for a walk, and coming back and saying, well, this part worked and this part didn't. And we really didn't have the final design completed until, maybe a week or two before the actual trip. So it really came down to the wire for us. And I even remember an evening of coming back from a walk. We tried it out behind my parents' house, and we had some other people helping us with the design, and we came back to my parents' house. We felt really defeated. We thought, oh man, we've just taken 1 step forward and 2 steps back. This is not going to be ready in time. And we got back to the house, and my mom was making tea, and my dad was sitting on the floor with a pile of styrofoam and an X-Acto knife. He's a retired airplane mechanic, and they said, all right, we're staying up and doing this. What do we need to do?
Wow.
And so worked it out, and it was a great backpack.
Did anybody have any experience in that kind of thing, designing and building something like that?
So we worked with a company called Deuter, and they have been making backpacks and child carriers for over 100 years. And so what we did was we took their child carrier, and we bought one, and we called them and said, hey, we want to kind of break the rules. We want to take this apart and use it as a base for what we want to do, but we need to redesign the seat. We need to add some extra supports. We need to take some things off. I weigh more than the limit is, and how can we safely do this? Can you work with us on it? So we had a lot of phone calls and Skype calls, to work out those details with them to make sure that we did it in a way that honored them and was also a good design for us. And then when we got back from the trip, we actually sent them our backpack, what we did in my parents' kitchen, and they made a factory version that we've been sharing. We've been distributing to families all over the world since then.
How great is that they partnered with you?
Mm-hmm.
I can see God's hand in taking a whole lot of things that seem improbable and making them happen.
Yeah.
So I asked what the biggest challenge was. What was the best thing about that first trip?
Oh man, there were so many, what I like to call high flying adventures. I mean, we got lost in Paris. We hiked the English countryside. We climbed at the end of the trip. We climbed the island of Skellig Michael off the coast of Ireland, which is more known nowadays for being the place where Luke Skywalker was hiding in the new Star Wars. Spoiler alert for anyone, but with all of that, I think my favorite moments on the trip were those quiet moments at the end of days or at the beginning of days where I could kind of look around at the team, and we could just acknowledge what God was doing and enjoy each other's company. I was telling my wife last night about, 8 years later, I'm still telling her new stories about our time. And I was telling her about one day when our cameraman, during breakfast, he went out for a walk. And after a while, we were like, where is Luke? We haven't heard from him. And after a while, he dropped a pin and texted us all and said, without explanation, just said, come here. And so we got me in the backpack, and everybody, grabbed some coffee, and we headed out and took this probably 20 or 30 minute walk to where he was and in Paris. I don't remember if I said that, but we got to the place and took the escalator, because I've never taken an escalator before. Why would we take the elevator?
Yeah.
And we went up it was in a mall, and we ended up on the rooftop where they had created like a deck kind of scene. And a lot of people were up there, but Luke had found this spot, and you could see the whole city from there. And it was right next door to the Opera House where the Phantom of the Opera takes place. And so moments like that where we just got to take in the fact of where we were and what we were doing was just such a overwhelming joy every day.
That's a spectacular place for sure, and easy to get lost.
Yes.
I remember standing there with a map in my hand. I could see on the map where I was supposed to go, and I still couldn't figure out how to walk there.
Yeah, thank you. I feel affirmed.
Absolutely. So what did that do to the relationship between your group of guys?
Well, it's funny because all the guys were, I knew them from different walks of life. One of them was, I had moved up to Indiana by then. I was from North Carolina, but in Indiana here, he was the worship leader at the church I was going to, and was a good friend, was helping get me up in the mornings and stuff. Some of the other guys, again, were from that potluck or from the music scene. And one guy we actually met in the fundraising process. He kind of tracked us down. He was a friend of a friend sort of thing, and met up with us and said, hey, I would love to join you guys and just help out any way I can. And so just all these varying degrees of knowing some guys for 8 years and some guys for 3 years and one guy for just a couple months, and yet on the trip, I would say because of the fun parts and the hard parts, all of it led to deeper relationships, getting to know each other better and getting to know ourselves better. And so still have great relationships with all of the guys, but some of them I still, keep in very regular contact with and still work on projects with and everything. So I still travel with a few of them, and it's just really created, kind of this band of brothers sort of bond.
Now, were you married to your wife by this time?
No, I met her 2 years later, which is a whole nother exciting story. But maybe that's another call. But the short version is after Europe, we asked the question again. We survived this. Where do we go next? And 2 years later, we went to China. And part of our visit to China, again, for 3 weeks, was that one of the weeks we visited and actually stayed at an orphanage for kiddos with disabilities. And so my now wife, Katie, she was from Illinois, but she was working there at the time. And so we got to know each other, and that's where we met.
Was that Stephen Curtis Chapman's show Hope?
Yes, yeah, it is.
I saw that you had been there.
Or was, yeah.
Is that not there anymore?
The work is still being done. The facility is still there, but Show Hope is not involved.
Okay.
But at the time they were.
Yeah. Well, good. So you met someone who was basically dedicating her vocation to helping orphans in China, which is that must have impressed you.
It did. It floored me. I mean, when I was considering, because we stayed in touch and became friends. Well, we were friends when we met and stayed in touch and became closer and closer friends. And at the point when I was considering asking her out on a date, I took about a month to really pray fervently about it, because I didn't want to take her from that work that was so important. And I just had a peace that I didn't need to worry about that. Maybe we would end up there together, or she might be coming home anyways. And it just worked out. So, yeah, thankful for that.
And then you did the trip to China. How was that different from the Europe trip?
Well, we had just a little bit of a different crew. A couple of guys weren't able to go, and so we had a couple of different guys join us. But for the most part, it was the same core team. And big difference was we had a translator with us. We didn't need one for the trip to Europe.
Yeah.
And what else? Well, I mean, we actually had a smaller team, so everybody had to pitch in with carrying a bit more. In Europe, we had 4 guys, and so we always had a rotation of 3 each day, and one guy could have a day off. And in China, because we only had 3 guys, it was more like, well, you get the morning off. So that was different. But it was also just a very different world, very different culture, and that was a big thing for us when we were considering where to go. Mm-hmm. We noticed in Europe that a lot of people would see us from across the street or on the other end of a train car and never communicate with us verbally, but you could watch them kind of come to understand what we were doing. And so we began asking, well, if we go somewhere else, where could we go that the language and the culture are so drastically different that we don't have to explain what we're doing, it will just be seen. and understood. And so we felt like China was a good fit for that. So that was something else, is that the trip was a little more intentional. When we went to Europe, it was just some guys going on a silly trip to have fun, and China was more for us like, well, where can we go to put on display this brotherly love that we were experiencing together.
Your organization is called We Carry Kevan, right?
Yes, sir.
Tell us what your intentions and goals are. What are you doing with that to help other people and raise awareness?
When we were going to Europe, and especially when we got back, and the world was kind of watching what we had done, we started hearing from families all over the world, and they were asking two main questions. The first was, where did you get this backpack? And the second was, where did you get these friends? And so we started the nonprofit as a means to answer those two questions. And so the first, as I mentioned earlier, we worked with Deuter and developed the backpack further to be able to share with families all over the world. And now we have about 1,200 backpacks in 48 countries, and that's 1,200 families that are thinking differently, thinking outside the box with accessibility, and they're also getting to, as a result, they're getting to experience life together. They're getting to do things together that they couldn't have otherwise, and so that kind of answers that first question. And for the second question, it's a little more nuanced and more difficult to answer, but we started by answering it. We started answering it by saying, well, we'll be your friend. We'll start there, and we'll walk alongside you as best we can through this life with a disability, and celebrate with you and grieve with you and struggle with you, and then what we are also doing in that process is encouraging and fostering a sense of community in these families, for them to invite people into their worlds, invite people into their needs. And so we're continuing to find new ways to do that. One way that we do that right now is on our website, you'll see that we have a section called Causes, and it's very in keeping with our original trip of needing to crowdfund to go to Europe. A family that wants a backpack can fill out a form, and we set up a crowdfunding profile on our website for them. And I really love this because we send them the link, and they share it with their friends and their family, and it gives them some practice in how to invite people into a need. But it's a fun need, it's, can you help me get this backpack so I can go have adventures? It's not, can you go to the doctor with me, or can you help me with the restroom or mow my lawn? It's kind of a fun thing to start with as an icebreaker, and so it helps them practice that voice, but it also makes their community aware of what they need, and hopefully that starts additional conversations of, when you get the backpack, can we go with you on the hike, or what else do you need, kind of thing. And so building friendships there, and then we share those with our community as well, and so that allows us to bring our friends into their friend circles.
What you're doing is so unique, I think, because you've really got two streams of helping people. I mean, one is very practical. This backpack, it can change someone's life because they get to experience things that they wouldn't be able to experience. But then the other one, this thing about friendships, I mean, that's profound, because you don't need to have physical limitations to be lonely.
Exactly.
And those principles can really, I think, can help anybody. That's incredible. Did you ever think you would be doing all this?
Well, first off, I agree with you that you don't have to have a physical disability or even a emotional or anything disability. That's we're all broken in some way, but you don't have to have something diagnosed in order to invite people into your life and your situation. And because we all get lonely, and we all need. We were created for community and created for fellowship, and I think our need for other people should point us to our need for Jesus, and so we should lean more into that. But to answer your question, I never saw this one coming. I spent a lot of years playing in bands and writing books and things like that, and having a lot of friends to have adventures with. But when it came to We Carry Kevan, as I said earlier, we were just some goofy guys going on a trip because we wanted to. And we created this backpack because that's how we needed to have this experience together. And I just love seeing what God has done with that. We had one plan, but he had a much bigger and more awesome plan. And now we get photos and videos from families all over the world that, an uncle carrying his nephew into up the side of a live volcano, or a mom carrying her daughter across a frozen lake, and people using snowmobiles and jet skis while carrying someone on their back, or hiking the entirety of the Appalachian Trail. And then you have families that use it to take the bus to the doctor or PT, or there's a family actually not far from us here that they use it every day to take their son out while they're doing chores around the farm, because they want him to experience that with them. And so, we thought that we had this great idea, and we thought our plans were so epic, but all these families have taken what we did and just exponentially grown it into their own dreams, and it's really an honor to be part of those stories and those lives.
Yeah, I was thinking about the whole issue of on the friendship side. We were created for community, yet study after study shows that most adults, particularly adult men, but to some extent women as well, have few to no close friends. Why do you think that is?
Well, I would say because we live in a culture where everything needs to look perfect, and when we are asked, how are you doing, it's not a real question. It's just a start to a conversation. I think Jim Carrey had a stand-up bit about that once, where it just became an auto response of "Fine, how are you?" even if they didn't ask "How are you doing?" And that's between social media and mainstream media and pop culture. There's this idea that I don't know, we're just shaping each other to be pretty two-dimensional, and even there's even this idea that you should have something wrong with you, but it's identifiable, and it's just kind of part of your two-dimension. It's not, there's not more depth we should really be diving into each other's lives so intricately, and but everything needs to look polished and shaped, and so especially with men, I think there's this sense of not realizing that we should invite people into that. We think we need to handle everything on our own, and that's just generation after generation kind of chipping away into that position. And it's really something where we need to be willing to open up to each other and invite one another in. And I think for men, a really great avenue that I've found is I think I have all these friends because I have a physical need. I need them to actually pick me up out of my chair and help me with the restroom or help with the shower or help me build this thing or fix this thing at my house because I can't do it. There's these physical projects that we get to do. And not that I'm a project, but my needs are a project, and we get to be shoulder to shoulder in those things. And I think God created us as men to connect over projects like that. And so in a culture where that's not always fostered, I think that's something that we can lean more into, realizing that you have needs that your friend, you can invite men into, and they can invite you into theirs, and you can work on projects together.
Yeah.
Fix that.
And Jesus said we're supposed to bear one another's burdens.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that's it's really a beautiful story, and I think I know you must be inspiring a lot of people with this, and it reminds me of the verse in Ecclesiastes where it talks about two are better than one, and a cord of three strands is not quickly broken, and you guys are living that out. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
How can people connect with you and We Carry Kevan?
The best way is just to check out wecarrykevan.org, and you can connect to our social media that way. You can sign up for our newsletter and definitely check out the causes as well while you're there, and see if there's a family that you want to help support and get them a backpack. And as a note on that, if you do support a family, once they get their backpack and they send us updates about their adventures, you get that update as well. And
nice.
So you get to stay connected and develop a relationship with them. So just go on our website, wecarrykevan.org, and join the adventure.
So you've got a couple of books out.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I had a book that I wrote about our adventure in Europe called We Carry Kevan. Basically, everything that we do is called We Carry Kevan. And that was the name of the original fundraiser, by the way, to go to Europe. Mm-hmm. It just stuck. So, I wrote that book. It came out in 2019 and is available through our website. But we also more recently released a children's picture book version of that same story. And we created it originally to be included in every backpack that we send out, because I realized that, parents or other adults could read the grown-up book, as we now call it, and they could even read it to their kids, but 95% of the people actually using our backpack were too young to read it themselves, and I wanted a version of the story that they could take in kind of as their own and see pictures and say, hey, that's me, that's what I'm doing. And so we set out to make the picture book for that reason. But as it came together, we realized it was really a story about friendship and about trusting one another and being trustworthy, and the beauty and the adventure that can come from that, those decisions. And so now it's available for everybody. So you can get that on our website as well.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes, so that'll be extra easy. Kevan, this is a great story, and because of the theme of this podcast, a lot of times it's pretty heavy, and it needs to be. But I appreciate you bringing so much light, and this is definitely a story that I think is going to lift people up. I mean that figuratively.
maybe literally if they need it back.
That's right. Thanks, Kevan.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for listening to Shaken. If you know someone who's asking questions like, why did God allow this to happen? Is God angry at me? What do I make of my suffering? Would you please share Shaken with them? You can help more people find Shaken by liking and subscribing and reviewing this podcast. You can find more episodes at purposely.com or wherever you get podcasts.